Greetings and welcome to LGR Oddware, where we're taking a look at hardware and software that is odd, forgotten, and obsolete. And today's thing is the Spacetec IMC Space Orb 360 game controller, joystick, gamepad, mouse alternative thing. It's got a big rubber ball on top and some buttons, and it's supposed to make your life way easier when it comes to playing 3D games, especially those with 6 degrees of freedom. Yeah, let's check it out. So, this is the Spacetec Space Orb 360 real-life 3D game controller, whatever that means. It cost $99 when it first launched in late 1996, and is an alternative input device for 3D PC games. Now there's a new way to move in 3D. Max out your 3D games with killer scores. Perform any move imaginable. I mean, I can imagine quite a lot, so that is quite the claim indeed. This whole box is filled with late 90s marketing nonsense. I can't help but love its inflated claims. As real as your own life, maybe more. The heck does that even mean?
What is real?
Apparently it means that this chunky-looking controller is as intuitive as balls. Literally, and has a ball on top that you twist and fondle in order to control the latest 3D games circa 1996. Games like Descent, Quake, MechWarrior 2, and Duke Nukem 3D, or any DOS or Windows 95 game according to the back of the package here, something we'll have to put to the test. I've always been quite curious about this thing because while it resembles an analog game controller mixed with a trackball, it connects via the serial port and is entirely digital. So yeah, it doesn't work like a traditional gamepad or a trackball. Instead of a rolling sphere or an analog control stick, you have a rubber ball mounted on a control arm, filled with multiple input sensors inside to provide 10 bits of precision using Spacetec's patented force and torque converter. Now, this was conceived by John Hilton, a mechanical engineering graduate of the University of Sydney, Australia. He originally called it the Screwball when applying for a preliminary patent in 1985, but it was named the Space Ball by the time it hit the market in August 1988. Now, these first iterations of the device in the late 80s and early 90s weren't meant for gaming though, but were instead geared towards professionals in need of a 3D input device with 6 degrees of freedom. In the early 90s, the company took on the name Spacetec IMC, headquartered just north of Boston, Massachusetts, and made a bunch of 3D input devices that were then licensed to and manufactured by companies like HP, Silicon Graphics, IBM, and Logitech. For example, the PS1 version of the Space Orb 360 was produced by ASCII Corporation and sold as the ASCII Sphere 360. But games were never Spacetec's bread and butter. That was computer-aided design and manufacturing, where Spaceball devices were licensed to companies for design work. As a result, their devices ended up being used in countless projects, big and small, on this planet and beyond. NASA famously used Spacetec technology in controlling the Sojourner rover as part of the Mars Pathfinder mission in 1997. So you'd think the late 90s would have been a great time for Spacetec, right? Not so much. Despite an optimistic outlook in their press releases, Spacetec suffered a $3.7 million fiscal loss in 1997, followed by a $3.3 million loss in 1998. Considering the entire yearly company revenue was just $8.9 million, that was pretty substantial. Heavy layoffs hit Spacetec on the 19th of October 1998, eliminating 20% of their 66-person staff. And this was followed up by an acquisition by Labtec just a few days later. And of course, Labtec did much better, with Logitech snapping them up for $125 million in January of 2002, and proceeding to roll up the Spaceball products into their 3D Connection brand. So yeah, considering the fact that everyone from McDonnell Douglas to General Motors to freaking NASA used Spaceball devices, there has to be something to the Space Orb 360, right? Well, let's get it unboxed and find out. I was pretty lucky to find this new on eBay, because these things developed quite a cult following over the years and can be darned tricky to find, especially new old stock like this. First up is the controller itself, which feels okay. Its build quality doesn't exactly instill much confidence, consisting of 6 squishy plastic buttons housed in an even more plasticky shell that brings to mind the crappiest Mad Catz controllers. The rubber Spaceball itself feels quite nice though, with a sturdy design and some quality rubber that's comfortable to grip onto. And on the end, you get a 9-pin serial connection with a 25-pin adapter included just in case you need an adaptive adapter for adapting adaptations. Then there's the bag of goodies, consisting of a CD-ROM containing the controller drivers and Spaceware real-life 3D software. Ooh. There's also a registration card to let Spacetech know that you've bought one of their things and what input devices you're replacing with the space orb. And finally, there's the 21-page instruction manual introducing you to Orbis, the Game Master, the Game Head. Ah, geez. The late 90s never change. So the whole idea here is to treat the space ball like an angry emoji or something. And basically, if you imagine the ball represents your head in 3D space, then moving around in 3D space should be as intuitive as moving your head. Yeah, alright, that's enough gimmicky documentation. Let's get this thing plugged in and set up with an appropriate PC running DOS and Windows, and try out a handful of games Spacetech recommends, and one or two that they don't. Okay. So I've got the Space Orb 360 plugged in, software installed on the recently repaired Lazy Green Giant. It just had a power supply go out, very easy fix. And yeah, at this point we have an assortment of icons that it provided for us. We've got a, a chicken demo, a bunch of guides and help things, an interactive trainer, customizer, monitor, and the Space Orb promo. Let's just start with this, because this is amusing.
Are you still fighting futuristic aliens with these prehistoric controllers? Well, if you are, get ready for the smoothest, most realistic gaming experience on the planet. The Space Orb 360. It'll take you to a new level of interaction. As 3D is your own life. Maybe more.
Okay. They were trying very, very hard to make this thing cool. And really, it's kind of cool enough as it is. I don't know why they were trying so hard. But yeah, let's just go for the interactive trainer, because this is actually pretty darn useful. And here's where we get to converse, or at least interact with Orbis. And there's something about the atmosphere of this program that I really enjoy. You'll see.
Welcome to the Orbitron Citadel. It's here that I'm going to train you. There are two ways to use your Space Orb 360. In a vertical position with the nose pointing at the screen, or in the horizontal. I'm going to teach you in vertical. It's easy. First, I'm going to teach you how to move forward. Place your thumb on the triple arches, the back of the power sensor. Push straight forward towards the screen. Try it, and stay on the path. Follow me. No, you cartwheeled right. Okay, now go left to the wall. Follow me. No, you twisted the ball left.
I didn't mean to. Let me try again, man.
No, you push the ball right.
What the? Hold on.
Push left, like this.
I got it.
No, you twisted up on the ball.
Have to be very gentle.
Awesome, Strafe Master. Let's try a spin.
Strafe Master! I've mastered it now. Anyway, with the lessons over with, you're just free to wander this space and just experiment with the controls, which it doesn't actually let you use all of them. In fact, it doesn't let you use any of these. It doesn't let you use the tilting this way or up and down. It's able to do those too, but you need like a 6 degree of freedom game in order to accomplish that. Otherwise, you're just kind of wandering this very enjoyably surreal 90s VR type space with all this graffiti on the wall, presumably of like people that were on the team making this or something, and there's like a random Thresh reference over here. Thresh kicks butt. And then there's like these ants that come out of different objects and stuff, and I don't know, it's just surreal and weird, and I love this kind of stuff. Anyway, we'll try one more thing here. This is the Spacetech IMC chicken demonstration. This gives you more of an idea of what you can actually do with the ball. So, you know, there's the movement, just sort of tilting this way. There's twisting. You can actually make it go up and go down and backwards and forwards, and just there's all sorts of ways you can twist this guy around. And yeah, it's very creaky, and it actually feels like it's going to break at any time, but it does work because it has that 10 bits of precision or whatever. It feels kind of analog, really. It's interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to some actual games here. So the monitor opens with Windows if you have it set to do that, and that will open up whenever you open either the customizer or the monitor. It will open this same thing here. And this is, well, really just a configuration menu for all sorts of things. And these are all the games that it comes pre-configured to work with. It's actually just looking out for the executables to execute, and when it does, it will attempt to automatically configure the game to work with the device here, which is important because this really is relying on software to do pretty much everything as far as I can tell, because again, it's plugged into the serial port. It's not connected like a joystick, but it's not connected like a mouse either, like you might plug into COM1 normally, but yeah, it's sort of an in-between. It's its own thing. It's relying on drivers in this software to sort of inject itself into certain games and then maps certain movements and actions to all of this. We'll come back to this in a minute, so let's just try some of the games that is pre-configured with first. Okay, we're going to start with Descent 2 here. 6 Degree of Freedom game should show this at its best, so to speak. And as you can see, it actually created a Space Orb pilot profile for me. Apparently it needed to do that in order to get some of the inputs to work properly according to the help file that Spacetech included. And yes, you do still have to use mouse and keyboard for the menus and such because, I don't know, it just doesn't have them mapped to anything on the inputs here, and it's not controllable with a joystick in the menus in this particular game. So, here we go. And really, this is about as intuitive as this device gets. It really is just, the same controls we were seeing in the trainer program, moving forward, moving backwards, strafing left and right and stuff. But in addition to that, you can tilt up and down, move the whole ball up to move up and down. And then there's these kind of things here to spin yourself around, which is, pretty handy to have them all in one spot, in theory. However, in practice, I don't like it. Just for the fact that it puts so much strain on both of my hands and wrists. Because yeah, otherwise it's actually, this is not the worst. But already, man, my hand is just absolutely crying out for me to stop. Oh my word, it hurts. So here's the problem. Because this thing is so stiff, I'm having to constantly move around and grip this a whole bunch. Like, my hand is turning red there, how much I'm having to grip it. And the grips are just awful. The ergonomics are terrible. It's super uncomfortable. There's not enough space on this side to both grip the controller and the ball. And because moving the ball any little bit at all moves the rest of the controller, you're having to either grip really hard right here or grip really hard right here, or in my case, both. It just is painful. That's all it is. And I'm sure I could get used to it a bit by using it even more, but yeah, this is honestly the best situation that the Space Orb can be in my experience with it so far. And that's not a good sign. All right, let's try something else here. We've got Quake. So this is like a proper first-person shooter. It's in 3D and all that kind of stuff. So again, I have to use the keyboard here to get into it. And yeah, so this was interesting to try out because here you have, your typical FPS style gameplay, which in this particular case is downright painful and very disorienting. Not only is it super sensitive, so you have to use fine little movements, and again, I have the sensitivity cranked way down, so this is a better situation. But yeah, you're moving and looking with the same input, and that's just not a good idea at all. I'm barely moving it here, and you can see that it's looking and moving around, and just that tiny little bit of movement. So when you're trying to do it all at once, and you're in the middle of a firefight, oof. Okay, where'd that dog go? It's not the best feeling, and again, I'm already feeling that wrist strain. And I know that part of that is because I just have wrist problems anyway, get all the things that you get from working on computers all your life, and carpal tunnel and all that good stuff is happening, so yeah, wrists hurt anyway, but with this, they're really being stressed in ways that they do not like. Twisting and contorting and putting constant pressure, I end up getting motion sick, like I'm already feeling a little gross because of the wobbly movement and everything else. I'm just trying to strafe around and stuff like that. I just want to move. Oh no, screw this. However, for 2.5D 3D first-person shooters like Duke Nukem 3D here, or Blood, or Redneck Rampage, or Shadow Warrior, or any of those kind of things, I think this is much more suitable when you have the view stuff turned off. So there's no looking around, even though that is an option in this game if you wanted to. Otherwise, I think this makes much more sense because you have auto aim, so you don't necessarily have to aim yourself. And that makes sense. It's like a 2.5D shooter anyway. It's using the ray casting, all that stuff. So it's still crap, but it's more tolerable crap. I'm not even going to try. That's just way too difficult with this thing. But, and again, I have the sensitivity turned down, and it's just absurd. This doesn't make any sense for shooters. Something like Descent or Forsaken, or Radix Beyond the Void, or Terminal Velocity, sure. But not first-person shooters, and yet it's configured to work with so many of them. I know this was before like mouse and keyboard became dominant, but good grief. Okay, let's try something a little different. Monster Truck Madness, a racing game. So this I thought would kind of make some sense because, well, it was configured with it, but it also has this sort of analog kind of thing going on with the controls here. So we'll just try this out. And you can see there, it's moving the steering wheel, and yeah. The thing is though, with a game like this, you have to hold forward on the joystick to accelerate. So I'm having to press forward all the time in order to accelerate, or back to brake. And that is just not a good time, man. But the steering actually is pretty good because you're just twisting. So this is actually not the worst controller for racing games. In fact, it's better than like a joystick or even certain analog sticks that I've used. It's certainly better than just like a digital control method, like using the arrow keys on your keyboard or something. I just wish that, and that's down to the game, I wish that you could change like accelerate and brake to like these. But instead they're just horns. And that is completely up to the way that this works. Like see these, you can only map certain things to the face buttons on a gamepad or joystick. And that's sort of another point here, is this really is just emulating a joystick for the most part. For instance, with Earthworm Jim here. And this is another game that it came pre-configured to work with. All these that I've tried so far have worked right out of the box. I haven't had to do any kind of configuration myself. And this is interesting though, because in platformers like this, it actually relies on the tilting left and right. And then like this is down and that's up. And wow, this game is really quiet without music. But yeah, it's totally playable. I mean, I don't recommend it, but it can be done. And it's actually a little more comfortable than some of the other games that I've played, especially like the shooters and stuff, because I can just grip it with this one hand, kind of. That's still not comfortable. But this, I can get a better grip on the ball and then just sort of move, left and right this way. And because it's just treating it as a digital, kind of a 1-bit control input here. There's no analog finesse kind of feel that I have to worry about. It's, just tilting it the tiniest little bit to the left and right means that I'm moving Jim left and right. So, all right, stop eating me, birds. Yeah, again, don't recommend it, but it's completely playable and more so than maybe you would anticipate. One more thing to check out here, though, and that is we're going to go back to the configuration thingy, customizer, and you can add your own games. Remember that claim in the back of the box is like, it'll work with any DOS or Windows game. Well, that's only kind of true. You have to keep in mind, it is going through the COM port, the serial first one of those right there. So it's not really a joystick or a mouse or a keyboard or anything. It's just its own thing relying on its own software and drivers to function. So it doesn't show up as a joystick by default in DOS games. And this configuration thing does not inject itself into DOS programs. And I checked the documentation and it pretty much confirmed my suspicions there. But the DOS games that it is configured with, like Doom and Duke 3D and all these others, they work, but that's because it comes with a configuration file to get it working. And that's something you had to download more of from the website back in the day. However, Windows games, it doesn't necessarily configure to work with all of those either. So for instance, I set it up with SkiFree, just to be stupid. But this doesn't even do that because SkiFree is a game that you either play with a mouse or a keyboard. And this doesn't emulate either one of those. It's only emulating joystick controls and like a throttle. So, yeah, this does nothing for SkiFree. You move it with a mouse and keyboard, but, you know, what's the point of that? And you can't actually customize these in this program either. All these button actions have to be done within the game's options menu itself. And then all these do, you can just switch around between the different joystick functions, and it will emulate those and let the game know that that's what, you know, these are mapped to. But otherwise, yeah, all you have is sensitivity and this skill level thing, which that just is the master sensitivity. If you want to add a game, though, that is in Windows and does have joystick support natively, then this will let you do that. And you can get any of those games to work, pretty much. So, for instance, I want, say, maybe Jazz 2 Holiday Hair. You have a type of game you can select from. This is a platformer, so whatever. We'll just choose joystick emulation. And then this will tell the game to treat this thing plugged into the serial port as if it were a joystick plugged into the game port. And really about the only thing we need to change here is just if we want the axis to move left and right, we'll have to choose that right here, which will be joystick right left. And then we'll switch this back to whatever that function was that Jazz 2 does not use. And again, we can't configure the actual buttons, have to do that in Jazz, but by default it uses 6 buttons anyway, I think, so it was pretty much fine when I first tried it. So all we have to do is run Jazz 2, and it works just like a joystick. So we have menu controls, and the buttons work because it's a game that is functioning with the joystick and the menus too. And here we go. It's pretty much just Jazz 2 with weird tilty controls. And this game treats joystick controls as digital. Yeah, just moving a slight bit left and right will mean that Jazz starts a move, which the Space Orb is not the worst thing in the world with platformers like this for that reason, because it actually makes it easier on my wrists and hands, and it's kind of pointless, but it can be done, and it functions a little better than you might expect. That's really about the highest praise I can give this whole device. It functions a little better than you might expect sometimes, but other times, like an actual 3D first-person shooters, it's just garbage. Most first-person shooters, really, unless you're talking about those 6 Degree of Freedom type of games. And I mean, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about this thing. And well, that is it for the Spacetec IMC Space Orb 360 thing. Yeah, you know, it's an interesting device. It's not as bad as I thought it would be, but it's also not particularly great either. It's at least not to a degree that would make me want to use it for any length of time with anything. And that's not to say I don't get it or think that the Spaceball things themselves are a joke. I mean, I've used some of the actual Spaceball devices meant for 3D modeling. Those do make sense, and they're a heck of a lot more comfortable and useful, I think. You know, they got the hand rest and the palm rest, and they're just better designed for what they're meant for. But this, sticking it on top of a game controller, much less a not very ergonomic one, I don't quite understand. However, I do understand that there are a lot of people that still like these things. In fact, some of the websites that are online, it's like there's fan sites, I guess, that used to be up. Some of them aren't anymore, but you can find archives of some of the Space Orb communities that have put out new drivers, and there's even something called the Orbotron that lets you convert this and make it work with more modern machines and games and such. And then, of course, there's also the Space Mice website. and a bunch of other things just dedicated to all these kinds of devices. So obviously they have a following. It's not that I don't get it entirely. It's just that I'm not a part of that. I can't, it's just too uncomfortable and it hurts my wrists too much, and there's too many better options these days. That being said, it's a fascinating piece of oddware, and I would be very much interested to know if you ever used one of these back in the day or more recently, if you loved it or hated it, or if you're like me and you're just kind of in the middle that thinks it's an interesting thing and that's about it. There's no rush to actually use it again. Wherever that may be, though, let me know in the comments, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode of LGR Oddware at the very least. I like doing these things any time that I can. I've always got more oddware planned, so stay tuned. I've got new videos every week. And as always, thank you very much for watching.